things that we noticed about our family, that they are really very similar type people. That you want to comment?
Her grandfather worked in a flour mill, and my grandfather, on my dad's side, worked in a flour mill in Minneapolis. We were mechanics, then moved to a farm, one in Minnesota and hers here. So their backgrounds are really quite similar.
Yeah. My grandfather, Will, his father and older brother migrated to Argentina from Switzerland in 1871.
When the wife of the father had died.
There was a British holding company that had offered tracts of land there for people to develop. The father and brothers, I guess, I'm not sure how this is, stayed for a while, but then that wasn't their cup of tea, the wheat farming. They had lived in an area in Switzerland where they had a sawmill, and it was mountainous, and they had orchards and vineyards.
Vineyards.
So it just really was not what they had in mind. And they went to Seguin, Texas. Now, why they chose there, I don't know. There was a third brother that came to South America sometime when they were, and stayed there longer. And then he too came up to the States. My grandfather went on up to St. Louis and worked a year there in a mill. And then he took off for Kansas. That he had heard that there was a job in Topeka for a miller. And on the way, and he came by train, he got off at Lawrence and was looking around, and the Bowersock Mills had an opening for a miller, and so he stayed there and was the head miller at the Bowersock Mill for a while. He married Ida Fisher in 1855, and this was one of their wedding presents, as well as the cabinet over there. That he had built a house that's on Connecticut Street that's still there for them to live in.
And I think the Bowersock Mill sent him to Tonganoxie because they were developing a new mill. So and he was in charge of that.
He installed the machinery there, and then they asked him to become the head miller, which he did.
And he came to Tonganoxie in 1871.
No, 1888.
Oh, okay. He was really an inventive character and developed a new...
Mill got a patent on it. And my brother has the papers for the patent, so that was real. One of the things it said along the way was that he was very good at cleaning the millstones, so that was kind of a trick, I guess.
And these were Shirley's fraternal grandparents.
And their names, can we say their names again?
Okay. He was Adam Wilhelm, and she... Freimuth, and she was Ida Henrietta Fisher Freimuth.
Fischer.
That kind of a Fisher. Okay. lived in Tonganoxie, and they had 5 children altogether, and 2 of them died in infancy. 2 are buried here in Lawrence at the Oak Hill Cemetery. Their oldest son, Otto, was born in 1888 in October in that year. And then they had a daughter, Alma, that was born in 1894. And my dad, Hans, in 1896. And he was, I don't know when they bought Many Oaks Farm. That I don't know.
Do you know what? Can you tell about Alma a little bit?
Okay. Alma, the sister, was Alma Marjorie, and she graduated from Tonganoxie High School in 1912 and KU in 1916. Then taught school at Tonganoxie for several years, and my mother was in several of her classes, so that was interesting.
Was she a home ec teacher?
That was one of the things she taught.
Okay.
I think I picked up some others like, well, I don't remember what else. I'll check it out sometime. But she really ended up being going to Minneapolis to the Menger Clinic.
To a special
clinic
on medical technician.
And so she did that for a lot of years.
In Leavenworth, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then your dad.
Okay, you tell what you think about.
Well, he was born in 1896 at what was called Many Oaks Farm, which is about 2 miles north of Tonganoxie. He had a large apple orchard. And he showed up Wilhelm's innovation. The house was up on a hill, and then on up on the top, they had a cistern and a pump that came to it, and then they had running water coming down from up on the hill there, so that even though it was a very early time, they had running water in the house.
And we had a bathroom, and that was kind of unique in those days, yeah. One of the things that the cistern was on what we called a bench, and then up above that there was some cropland and an orchard. Yeah, Grandpa Will was the head miller at there in Tonganoxie until 1902, and then he quit that and farmed full time. And his brother Jake, who had come later, I think became the head miller for a time then. So they kind of kept that in the family.
And what was the name of the milling business in Tonganoxie?
It was the Bowersock Mills.
Bowersock Mills.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he, Hans was kind of a progressive type person. And tell what impressed you about what he did.
Well, he did go to K-State for a while on some kind of a special agricultural training. And he was in the Grange, but he used to go around giving talks about the values of the metric system, trying to encourage people to shift to that, and on progressive means of farming scientifically. So he kind of had that from his father, I expect, to do it to the very best that the latest helpful science would let you do.
One of the pictures that I found this morning, which we hadn't looked through the box before, was a picture of he and his brother Otto with a 1912 Studebaker. So they did the kind of the latest things. And
Now, did they have a second occupation? You said was it your father? You said stopped working at the mill, and
my grandfather.
Grandfather stopped and then became a farmer.
Yeah, it evidently had already bought the farm and established that because he wanted to take care
of the trees.
Yeah, take care of the orchard and do that full time. So, yeah.
You do have some reminiscences. Dad went to school in Tonganoxie.
Grade school and
high school. He was not in World War I because he'd had this enlarged heart. And they had a German-sounding name. And one of the things that was kind of interesting was just really very recently.
Oh, within the last 5 or 6 years.
When Shirley had run into somebody that had been prejudiced against anybody that was German, and she mentioned she was Frymouth, and what did he say?
Oh, yes, I remember Hans. He was a no-show or something like that, and that was, 70 years later?
And of course he wasn't, he couldn't go in.
Yeah, he was getting ready to go to the Red Cross, and then they had Armistice Day. Mm-hmm. But it was, the prejudices just go on forever.
I think Shirley had said that her great-grandfather, the father of Wilhelm, had emigrated from Switzerland because he didn't want to go into the military. And they had a kind of a universal subscription or enlistment that was required.
Yeah.
Now, your father's name, Shirley, just so I get that, was Hans?
Yes, he was William Hans.
William Hans.
But they always went by the middle name.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He was a good athlete, which is why I suppose they would feel that there was nothing wrong with him, that he couldn't have gone.
One of the things that he did when they were in high school, they played Haskell, because they had a high school there, and he mentioned a fellow that was the kicker, and he never wore shoes when he did that.
But he played football. Did he do basketball?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, okay. And then he worked on the family farm for a while, and then bought a piece of land of his own. And for a while they had a business name of
Frymouth and Sons.
Frymouth and Sons, with Hans and the brother and the father. And that lasted for a couple of years is about all. And then the other brother didn't want to continue with that, so they broke off. And then he bought his own farm.
Well, that was...
No, they went to Wabunsee County.
Yeah, he had an uncle here in Lawrence that had owned a farm at Harveyville, which is in Wabunsee County. And they were out there 3 years. Mother's story about it is that they went out in the covered wagon and they came back with a whole freight car of goods. Hans's father and my grandfather died in 1925, and the brother Otto did not want to manage the farm anymore, so he moved to Colorado, and Daddy came back and managed the farm for Grandma.
Can you tell me, Shirley, about all your siblings so we get that?
Okay. I have one brother. There were just the two of us.
5 years older than her.
Yeah.
Okay. And his name?
Is William Leland.
And right now he lives in a retirement center in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And then there's me.
He was a ham radio operator and worked at WREN, which was a very, very early radio station based in Tonganoxie.
The transmitter was here. It was in Tonganoxie. The studios were here in Lawrence.
Oh, okay.
But the transmitter was in Tonganoxie.
Yeah, it used to. I don't know who lives out there now,
Yeah.
but it used to have the big Jenny Wren in front of it and real tall towers. And I guess, from my understanding, is that the wires are still buried underneath the property for that.
And so he ended up studying electrical engineering and was in World War II
Here at the university.
as an officer in the Signal Corps, and was in Africa and in Europe, and then worked for a company in Maryland that did research for the Navy on guidance systems and things like that for sonar, underwater exploration materials. Was very, very skilled.
Yeah, I didn't remember that he was in Africa. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, I'll say that.
But that was later. He
Yeah.
started out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I remember that, they were in North Africa.
This is interesting experience that we don't both come up with the same thing, do we?
That's the way memories work sometimes,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And Shirley was born in 1925,
Yeah.
and attended K-State, and as a dietetic studies.
Mm-hmm.
And then she came out to the University of Washington to take an internship for a year on industrial dietetics. And I grew up in Idaho, and I'd attended the University of Washington for 3 years, and then dropped out to work for a year and was drafted in March of 1941, and spent most of the war on a little island called New Caledonia out in the South Pacific, and then came back and went back to school. And we met at the University Congregational Church College Youth Program. And I can remember when she first walked in, I thought, I like that. She just seemed so lovely. And we didn't really have a date for quite a long time, but then towards the end of the year, we finally got together. Then we're married in Tonganoxie at the Congregational Church. And we're still together.
Fantastic.
57 years now.
And it's fantastic. Shirley, can you tell me about, and then we'll come back to that area. Can you tell me about your elementary school? Did you go to elementary school in
Yes,
Tonganoxie?
I went to Friendship Valley School, which is north of town. Dorothy Korb lives out. It's a piece of that Korb farm. Is where it was. And
the country schoolhouse.
yes. I think it's still there, made into a house, of course.
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you recall any of the names of your teachers?
Oh, yes. My first and second grade was Bill McNamee. My third grade was Faye Brown. My fourth grade was Maud Williams. Beulah Lanahan for fifth and sixth, and Nancy Lamburn for seventh and eighth.
Great.
Okay.
One of her comments has been that her folks always boarded the teachers. So it was more than just knowing them at school. It had them at the house.
Well, no wonder you could remember their names.
Yeah, I
after
suppose
all
that's
these
right.
years.
Yeah. So they were really interested in education. I think Mother was on that school board out there, and So, and Daddy was probably 15 or 16 years on the Tonganoxie School Board, and when they built the gym that is at the grade school now, that was in the 50s. When he was on the board, they built the new high school when he was on the board.
And all the elementary schools in the area were consolidated.
And he was on that. And then they had some other property that they had added, and I think that's where the junior high is now, that he didn't help build that, but got ready for it.
And then Shirley's mother died. When was that?
In 99.
No, your grandmother.
Well, we're still searching it out. I said it was 1937, and my mother says 1939, so we've got to check that out.
But anyway, at that time, then the farm was sold, and Hans bought the place at Reno, which is where we held our wedding reception after we were married, out in the farmyard.
And did you then set up household in Tonganoxie?
Not then, no.
No, I had decided to go into ministry at the end of my second year back after the war. And so I had gone back to Yale's Divinity School for a year, and Shirley went to Texas Tech in Lubbock as a dietitian for that year. And then we were married, and then we both went back to West. Really majored in Christian education and had planned on being a worker in a large church in the Sunday school work. And then at the end of school, we kind of decided we were both small town people and we didn't want to be in a big city. And the Congregational Church had some leaders who came to give a talk called Parish of Promise, of little churches out in the boondocks that could be probably pretty stable, but nobody stayed long enough to stabilize them, and that they would give you help in seminary if you'd agree to stay 3 years. So we signed up for that, although I had gone through seminary with the GI Bill as having been in the service for 4.5 years. And so we didn't need any financial help, but we got signed up for what was called the Blaine County Larger Parish. You know where the Halsey Forest is?
No.
You don't know where Dunning, you know where Broken Bow is?
Yeah.
Okay, well this was we lived in Dunning, 40 miles west, had 3 little churches in this county with 1,200 square miles and 1,200 population. And we loved it. And we stayed for 6 years. And both our kids were born in Broken Bow. But their daughter was ready for school, and we felt that would be good to move before, so she didn't have to break in her schooling. So we went to Geneva, Nebraska, and stayed there 7 years in the county seat town. And then we went to Buena Vista, Colorado, which was a little mountain town that had a church that had about 125 members, and 50 of them split off over a church fight because they'd had a really conservative young life worker as their minister. And when they decided to really be a congregational church, he and all the people he had brought in left. And so I had told the conference minister several years before on a training program that I'd always dreamed about going to my hometown in McCall, Idaho, and bringing that church to life. But I thought, well, if Jesus didn't get a good reception in his hometown, I didn't know whether I could expect to do better. But this was a parallel kind of thing, so we signed up for them. We were there 14 years, and the church is now one of the really strong churches in that conference, and especially per capita giving and witness and service. So we felt good about that. But then Shirley's folks' health was deteriorating, and they couldn't. That was 8,000 elevation. Her dad couldn't stand the elevation to come visit, so she wanted to come fairly close. So we came for their 60th wedding anniversary, and the church didn't have a minister. They were still looking at that time, so they thought, well, I got somebody we can have for free. So in the sermon, I mentioned about we wanted to move to the area, and one of the trustees said afterwards, well, why don't you come here? So I broached that with her mother and her parents. Her mother said, oh no, this church eats ministers, but we never had any problems wherever we'd been, because I'm kind of mellow. And so we did sign up and come, and I served there for 8 years, and then was almost 70, and we decided to retire. But we lived there because her mother was still living there. But her father died about 2 to 3 years after we came. Mm-hmm. So it was timely.
Starting out with the railroad story. Mother had said that when they were first married, they lived in a little house back of the hill, and that the Northwestern Railroad came through very close to their house, and that the engineer used to throw out the Kansas City Star so that they could read this paper every day, and they were very great readers, so that was helpful to them. One of the other or several memories from the Depression and the drought days are that one day my dad came in the house, and I think he had workers to pay for the work of the apple orchard, and so he called First State Bank to see what his bank balance was, and they said it was something over $7, and so he hung up the phone and laid down and stretched out on the floor that he just felt so badly.
Because you maybe didn't have enough to pay him,
right,
broke
yeah.
after that.
And the other thing that I remember about those days, besides the hot weather, was that there was a family that lived just a quarter of a mile up the road that moved out from Kansas City, and the father had been laid off from the Chevrolet plant because they had reduced their workers, and they were really poor. They had no income, and so we kind of looked down on them because they went along the road and picked dandelion greens so they'd have some greens to eat. And then the mother was pregnant, and she had told my mother she just didn't know whether they could have that baby or not. They were just so poor.
And your father, I guess, helped start the Historical Society?
Yes, he helped to found the Historical Society and was chairman of the board for quite some time. I don't remember how long. And they had both a president and a board of directors because that was the way the State Historical Society was set up. Evidently, he had done some research on this.
And he done some research on the railroads.
Yeah, I found a paper that he had written that he was ready to give at the Historical Society the year he died. And so he died in March, and along about May or June, why it was read, because...
And what year was that?
1982. So it gives some facts, and so I'll look at those. Okay.
Now, and then your mother passed away
in 1999.
1999, and what was her name?
Leila May Walters Freimuth.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about her family's ancestry? Where was the Walters from the Tonganoxie area?
Well, her family, immediate family, had moved there in 1914.
Okay.
And there's scads of information about her family. There was the Walters, and then her mother was Adams, and her grandfather was in the Civil War and had lost an eye, and laid out for about 6 weeks because there's no medical help, and he always we have one picture of him that's straightforward, and after that all the pictures are from his left side because his eye was gone. So, and of course the Adams, or lots and lots of Adams, and the Walters, there were, it was pretty good length of ancestors there too, but there were 7 boys and 2 girls, maybe 8 boys in the family, so there was always lots going on. And they used to...
And your grandparents moved, well, they were started out in Brown County?
Yeah.
And then moved to Nemaha County.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're in on the Indian Territory in Oklahoma.
They went down there in 1903.
And bought a place and stayed 3 years. And the mother got typhoid, or malaria.
Because there were so many mosquitoes, said they just would pack the screens. And then they had green-headed flies, I think, also.
Did they come back to Tonganoxie, or did they come back to...
No, they came back to where's Powhatan? One of those counties, and then they were there for a while, and then they moved to Tonganoxie in 1914.
And that's an interesting story about where they lived. They bought it,
Yeah.
but it had been a big, very nice house built by a family named Delahaye.
Well, somebody else built it, from what I can figure, but the Judge Delahaye from Leavenworth, worked in Leavenworth, was the one that owned the property.
And his wife was related to the Lincolns, President Lincoln's.
For a long time, there was a story, in fact, it was 30 years, and it wasn't until maybe 5-6 years ago that this was a kind of a myth that Abraham Lincoln had stayed all night in that house when he came to announce his candidacy for presidency in 1859, and but that just couldn't be from what further research had said along in the 90s.
Now this house, can you tell me this house was in Tonganoxie?
No, it's 5 miles north.
5 miles north.
And it's still there. The McGraws owned it.
Called Lincoln's Rest, and has a plaque there that Lincoln was there, although that was done before it was refuted by the State Historical Society. It was certified.
So,
And then they moved to town.
So the house was certified by the Historical Society of the state, but it ended up not being.
Or was it the county?
The county.
I don't know. We'll have to check that out. Okay. Then they moved to town, I can't remember just when, in the 40s, and Grandma had a stroke and was in bed for 6 months, and then she died, and 51, I think. And then Grandpa lived there by himself, and he died as a result of burning leaves in his yard. He got caught in that fire. So that's really something.
So she had the privilege of growing up with both sets of grandparents.
We take turns going one Christmas we would be at one grandparents, and then other Christmas we'd be with Dad's side. So
her mother, well, let's see, the Walters had two children. Perry, and Perry Walters has the apple orchard at Wild Horse.
that's his
That's
son.
the first cousin of Shirley's.
Yeah, it's Perry's.
And then her mother was how much younger?
3 years.
3 years. She was evidently very bright. She did go to grade school in Tonganoxie because her brother was older and he could drive the horses in.
Well, I don't think that's quite.
Okay. But anyway, she went through high school in 3 years and was an omnivorous reader. She would belong to a number of reading clubs and forget how many books that she was certified as having read, but it was a really very large number. So even though she didn't go to college very much, she was very, very well educated.
She was 17, and they were married 63 years.
One of those stories that I remember being told early, that Hans hadn't been to see her for a little while. I don't know just what was going on. But Valentine's Day, she found a valentine that had a little packet of lettuce seeds, and she wrote on it, "Come and let us be wed," and mailed it to him, and he very quickly responded.
So that was in February, and they were married in April then.
Fantastic. Well, as we maybe conclude today, let's maybe finish off with just from the time that you retired, you were still in Tonganoxie, it sounds like, for another 15 or so years, is that right? Or
Well, that'd be 14 years.
14 years. So, of course, I saw you as, I've been there since 83, so I saw you around town quite a bit. So if you just want to kind of finish up with that part, then we'll call it a morning.
Okay, well, why don't you do that?
About my involvement in the community
Sure.
and that kind of thing. Okay. Well, the Tonganoxie Church is really pretty small, and it doesn't take full-time effort to keep it going. So I was quite active in the Chamber of Commerce, in the 4-H, and I majored in mechanical engineering, and I had inherited from my dad quite a few woodworking tools. And so I worked with especially Happy Helpers kids in 4-H woodworking. And then there were several other groups that didn't have anybody to help them that we knew through other things like the church and so on. And they would come and say, "Well, would you help us?" And so I did. So one of the very satisfying things in those early years was helping with woodworking. In fact, you're familiar with Walter Lee and Nyla Denholm? They were in the church, and when they helped unload, or he did, all the tools, they came and said, "Well, would you work with the kids?" Because they had 4 boys. And so that was kind of where I started on that. And I can't remember the name, but fairly early on there was a little boy who was just almost his first year in woodworking, wanted to make a horseshoe shaped with horseshoe nails in it for a tie rack for his dad. And so I really helped him, and I kind of pushed him to really, really sand it smooth and then just to wax it. And he got the purple ribbon that year. After that, I had some people that did some fantastic things, but I left them to do the finishing, and they didn't do a good job of putting the finish on. And I suppose that was a weakness on my part, that I wasn't just sure how to tell them what to do. Well, one boy built a glider swing, and another one built a roll-top desk that was so big he couldn't get it in his house.
Had to take it in the basement.
And I think he got the purple ribbon, but they couldn't get anybody to take it to the state fair
Yeah.
with him. But I really did enjoy working with all of those kids, and because of that, one year I was named 4-H Volunteer of the Year at the fair. And I guess the president of the county 4-H council of the students was a member of the church and was one of the ones that I'd helped with her project. And so she got Shirley to say, well, I want to go out for this barn sale when the 4-H cattle and so on are auctioned. So we went out, and then she came and announced that I would be the 4-H person. Was very active in the Chamber of Commerce and was named Citizen of the Year twice. After I retired, I did a lot of volunteering at the school. Started off with 6th grade kids on some pre-algebra kind of things. And then later, for a number of years, volunteered with the 8th grade algebra teacher to be there when the kids would have their homework period of the period, so that there would be more than just a teacher to respond when they'd raise their hands. And I did that for quite a few years and found it very, very satisfying. And then just before we moved here, I guess I had gone back to the elementary school for 6th grade. And there were 4 6th grade boys that really were kind of hot on math, and they wanted to do 7th grade math. So I went over every day and sat in the hallway and with them and kind of self-directed, and then would give them the tests and grade them and certify them to go on. And they really, later on when they were in junior high, were ones who went to the state contests on math and excelled very well. So this was very satisfying. And every once in a while, if some kid would flag me down and was going by, "Hi, Mr. Kasper."
Well, in fact, just about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, we went to the University Bank over here where he have an account, and went and up to the drive-up window, and the young man that waited on us said, "Well, good morning, Mr. Kasper." And he, "Oh, yeah, okay," and he waited on him, and I said, "Well, how did you know our name?" "Oh, I remember him from math class." That was great.
Very satisfying.
But I really liked young people and working with them. Keeps you young, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's super. Well, on behalf of the Historical Society, I want to say thank you, and I don't know where this is going to lead, but I think we've captured a wonderful part of Tonganoxie history and your history.
I guess just a tiny bit more. And Shirley's dad was the president and sexton for the Maple Grove Cemetery Association. And then I really inherited being the president of that. And I was treasurer of the Historical Society for a number of those early years.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much. Okay.